Alright, so welcome. You want to play D&D. Well, the first thing you should have done, if you haven't already, is navigate to the dice tray in our Discord server, welcome to Waterdeep, and use the command !randchar. !randchar. This will generate a random set of stats, which will be helped to use to identify what your character is good at, what they're okay at, and what they might possibly be no good at. So in this case, we have J-Russ has generated a random character whose stats are 11, 15, 16, 16, 16, and 15. Right now, these are just static numbers. They don't mean a lot for you. That's okay. Ignore that. So, once you've generated your random stats here, using the link provided to D&D Beyond, you'll go to our campaign. From there, you'll start creating a character. The first thing you'll do is name your character. So we'll hit randomize a couple of times here. So, Faina. We'll create Faina. Sources. Normally, we're not going to change too much here. For this campaign, we'll leave all of this content turned off. If you already turned it on, that's fine, not a big deal. We'll leave it as is. Advancement type will be set to milestone. What this means is, you guys will progress in level based on reaching certain points in the campaign. So, once you've achieved a certain set of goals, you'll then advance to level 2. Level 3 will follow, and so on and so forth. How many levels are there, you say? There are 20 in total. Will we reach level 20 in this campaign? Probably not. I believe this campaign is designed to take you to level 10. We can modify some things as we go along if necessary, but for the most part, this will take us to level 10. We can then either continue additional story with our same characters, or we can take these same characters and put them in a different place, or we can start something completely new. That'll be entirely up to you guys. Hit point type. For you guys, for this campaign, I would leave this at fixed. What this is going to do is, every time you progress in level, you gain additional hit points. If you select manual, this means you're going to take a chance every time you level on rolling dice to see how many hit points you get. Your hit points are calculated by using the hit die for your class, which we'll identify later, as well as your constitution modifier. Again, we'll look at that a little bit later. Fixed means it's going to work on a linear path, which means every time you level, you will get X amount based on your modifier and your class. Manual means you might only get 2 sometimes, but you might also get 8 sometimes. It all depends. Again, I recommend let's leave this at fixed for now. Use prerequisites. We will use prerequisites here. Feel free to leave those both. So as you progress in levels, there are certain points at which your class will allow for either a skill point bonus or an ability score increase is what it's referred to as, or at that same time you could also choose to take a feat. A feat is going to be a feature that you can add to your character that shows that they have expertise in some skill. We can take a look at feats as we get closer to level 4. That's typically where everybody will get their first ability score increase or feat to add. Show level scaled spells. Yes, we want to leave this ticked. This is going to make it so that when you look at what spells you can cast, it will show you what's going to happen at those levels. Encumbrance type. Feel free to set it to no encumbrance. I'm not going to make it so you guys can only carry so much shit. I don't really care how much you're carrying. I don't feel like tracking it. I don't track it for my other campaigns. It seems kind of asinine or redundant to try and keep track of all that. Ignore coin weight. You guys are going to be getting a lot of coins, I imagine. Ignore it. Okay? Again, just like encumbrance I'm not worried about, coin weight I'm also not worried about. we'll keep an eye on, okay, are you reasonably carrying too many things? Maybe we can address that later, though. Ability score, modifier, display, that's entirely up to you guys. The modifiers are going to be the thing that is used most frequently. It's not very often that we would refer to the actual score. What we'd typically be working with is the modifier. So I always leave modifiers on top. That's the number you usually work with. And then character privacy, you can leave it public or you can set it private. Really, it comes down to, can everybody else view that character, or can only you and the DM view it? I have had one campaign, I think, where I had it set to private, and the character is doing something really crazy with their background. They are a dragon, but the rest of the party does not know that yet. So, okay, so that's everything under the home section. You will have named your character. We will use milestone and fixed hit points. Okay, moving on. Race. This is where you will identify the race of your character. As you can see, there are quite a few different ones here. There are actually a lot more than what we have here. Again, the only content that we have here is the stuff that I have unlocked. So if you guys feel like you want all of the really cool stuff, feel free to Venmo Matthew. I think it'd end up being like $50 a person, and we can unlock everything. That's, of course, a joke. I don't think you guys will be that invested just yet. But this is where you'll choose what race you would like to use. So in this case, if I was to choose an Arakakra, it's basically bird people, is what it comes down to. They get +2 to dexterity, +1 to wisdom, they can fly, and they have talons. So their flight, you have a flying speed of 50 feet. So basically you can't be wearing medium or heavy armor, otherwise it makes you too heavy to fly. And then you have talons, which are kind of like natural weapons. You'll also come across some of the races where they have sub-races. So you could be a dwarf, just a generic vanilla dwarf. You could also choose to be a mountain dwarf. So as a mountain dwarf, you get +2 to your constitution. You will have dark vision, which means you don't need a torch to be able to see. Dwarven resilience, dwarven combat training, stone cutting. So you get a lot of these different things, and you can read through some of these. Some of these will matter for us. Some of them are for more hardcore DMs than myself. But some of this will come up later. You might see a statue that you have some questions about. All right, stone cutting allows you to basically be pretty good at identifying what the hell's going on with that thing. So for this one, we're going to go with a rock gnome. We're going to get +2 to our intelligence. We have dark vision. We have gnome cunning. And then we have some other additional traits that weren't listed there between being a tinkerer. We have artificer's lore. So we're going to be a rock gnome. So again, you can go through and you can read about these different things. For now, I'm not too worried about it. So now we've established what our guidelines are going to be, and then we have a race. The class. This is where things start to get interesting, right? I know some of you are talking about druid. I know that J. Russ is a barbarian. We have a rogue. There's been some discussion of ranger. I know there is also a sorcerer. So I think my favorite class so far has been warlock. So let's go ahead and take a look at warlock. So it's a wielder of magic. They're going to be a caster. Their hit dice are D8. This is where we talked about the hit points increase every level. When you go to increase in level, if you don't do fixed, you're going to be rolling a D8 to see how many hit points you're going to be adding. Could be 8, could be 1. Just kind of depends. Their primary ability is charisma. If you are somebody who likes to min-max, meaning you're trying to get the optimal build, it means your highest stat should probably be charisma. Keeping in mind, you get bonuses from the race you select sometimes. So like our rock gnome that we picked, they get +2 to intelligence. So I probably don't need to put quite as much into my intelligence because I'm by default going to be getting +2 to it. And I want to try and put extra stats into charisma when possible. Your saves are wisdom and charisma. All this means is if I call for a wisdom save or a charisma save, you're going to have bonuses to those. Not very often we'd get a charisma save, but it does happen every once in a while. Wisdom saves, those are relatively common. Ability score improvement, again, the ability increase. It's at 4th level, and then again at 8th, 12th, 16th, so on and so forth. So we don't need those. We already talked about those. So, for a warlock, you get to choose right away an otherworldly patron. And then you get pact magic. If you have an interest in a warlock, you can start to read through this. The long and short of this is going to be, this is going to summarize your character's progression for you. It's not going to be everything, but it's going to give you an idea of what's going to happen when. So, like in this case, at level 2, you get Eldritch Invocations. At level 3, you get a Pact boon. So, whatever otherworldly patron you chose to be your, basically, magical sugar daddy, then you get to choose, okay, what are some extra benefits, friends with benefits kind of thing, are we going to get out of this? And then, as you start to go along, you'll get Mystic Arcanum, and then you'll also get Eldritch Master. You get Mystic Arcanum there, another Mystic Arcanum, blah, blah, blah. You get proficiencies with your class. So like in this case, Warlocks are proficient with light armor, which means they can wear things like light leather, things like that. And we can address, what kind of armor and things like that you would like to wear when it becomes relevant. Weapons, simple weapons. In the player's handbook, there is a table for what are referred to as simple weapons. Quarterstaffs, daggers, short swords, a light crossbow, things like that. They're not going to deal a heavy amount of damage, but some of them are stronger than others. Saving throws we talked about again, wisdom and charisma. Skills. So the skills are how you basically are going to determine failure and success in the world. So you're going to ask me at some points, do I see anything in the room? And I'm going to say make a perception check. That's a skill. Perception is a skill. So when you select your class, you get to then choose 2 skills from this brief list here. This isn't all of them. I believe there's like 23 skills or something like that. But you get to choose 2 from here. What you're doing is you're choosing the ones that you are proficient in. What does being proficient mean? It means that you actually get to add an extra bonus when you roll. So whenever you roll for a skill check, you're going to add whatever your skill level is in that. And that's going to show up in your character sheet. We'll look at that in a little bit. When you choose 2 skills off this brief list here, you're going to become proficient in them, which means your bonuses are higher. So instead of being +2, it might be +4. Instead of being +3, it might be +5, so on and so forth. And it is possible to be negative. If your score is below 10, like I know a couple of you have an 8 or a 9, it can go negative at that point. And then your hit points, this just kind of identifies how your hit points are going to be calculated. So at first level, you get 8. It's just an automatic maximum on the die roll of 8, and then plus your Constitution modifier. And then every time you level up, it's going to be 5 plus your Constitution modifier if you are using the fixed. So if your Constitution modifier is 1, you're gaining 6 hit points per level. Otherwise, if you choose to roll, it's going to be the +1 for your Constitution modifier, and then whatever you roll on the die. Okay. So, once you select your level for your class, you can then go into proficiencies. Notice it has the blue exclamation point that's telling you, hey, you need to select something here. And then you'll pick 2 things. So, let's say for our warlock, we are good at history, and we are good at investigation. And then it's also going to tell me otherworldly patron, we need to pick one. Okay, so we can either choose the Archfey, Celestial Fiend, Great Old One, Hexblade. They all have their different advantages and disadvantages. For this purpose, I'm just going to go with the Great Old One, commonly referred to as Cthulhu. So, right now, Arcane Research gets bestowed on you, blah blah blah. You can learn more about that if you want. Expanded spell list. Because I chose the Great Old One, there are a certain set of spells that aren't normally available to warlocks, but they are unlocked because of this background. And you can see that here. And then Awakened Mind, get a special ability. Okay? As we level up, you can either add levels of the same class, which means you just are becoming a better warlock or a better rogue or whatever. You can also do what's called multi-classing, which means you start to dabble in other things. There are skill-based requirements for those. In order to multi-class rogue, you're going to need to have a dexterity score of, I think it's 14 or better, so on and so forth. So we can look at that when we go to level up. So we have our level 1 warlock listed here. We've selected everything, so the blue exclamation points went away. All of our choices we needed to make have been made. So we're going to go to next. Choose a generation method for ability scores. You guys will be doing manual. Some of you have already done this already. So this is where you're going to come back here and you're going to take these numbers. You can only use each set of rolls once. So like this 16, only use it once. This 16, only use it once. This 16, only use it once. 11 and 15. So for the purposes of this, so I have a 14, 13, 9, 14, 13, and 15. Not bad overall. So let's say I'm somebody who wants to min and max. Okay, so my charisma should be my highest score as a warlock. So I'm going to use this 15 for that. So I'm going to go find my charisma and go 15. Okay, so that's been used already. So my next numbers down are 14s. Okay, well, I'm going to make my constitution a 14, and then it seems like I'm going to be pretty smart overall. Okay, so I've used both of my 14s already, so I have two 13s and a 9. So my warlock's probably not the most nimble guy. He probably doesn't need to be. Like, if you're being sponsored by Cthulhu, like, you probably don't have to be super acrobatic. Which leaves us just our 13s, and those obviously plug right in there. So these are your ability scores. Remember, I talked about scores are not used very common. This is about the only thing you're going to hear them referred to for. Then we come down here, and we get the total score. Okay, this is where we're actually going to see modifiers come out. Okay, your total score is going to be your racial bonuses and any other bonuses you may have from your class or from your background. And then the modifier is the thing that we're going to use the most. So I have a +1 in strength, a -1 in dexterity, +2 to my constitution, +3 to my intelligence, +1 to my wisdom, and +2 to my charisma. So overall, not bad. How are the modifiers calculated? So it's your total score minus 10 divided in half, basically. So, like in this case, you're going to be 10 minus 9 is 1, divided in half it ends up being -1 effectively. So it's a sliding scale. The basic principle is take your score, minus 10, cut it in half. So, knowing that you can't end up with half numbers, it always rolls up to the next whole number. So, that is your ability scores. Next, we come to our backgrounds. So, this kind of helps to establish what has your character been doing with their life up to this point. How did they get to this point where they're like, yes, I'm going to put myself in grave peril? You can go through the list, pick one that you like. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense to your class. It doesn't have to make sense to a lot of different things. If you are a rogue and you want to be a criminal or a spy, great. If you're a rogue and you want to be a knight, Perfectly acceptable, however you want to do it. These come into play. So we are a warlock. Let's say we're a folk hero. We get a tool proficiency and an artisan's tool. Again, this could come up at some point, but I wouldn't get too hung up on it. It doesn't have to be perfect. So let's say our warlock is really good with brewer's supplies, really good at making ale or spirits or whatever. Okay, they get a feature called rustic hospitality. There are some suggested characteristics that can help you to define what is your character like. I'm not going to get too hung up on these. If you collect or you select if someone is in trouble, I'm always ready to lend help, and at some point somebody's in trouble and you go, yeah, no, I'd rather not die today. I'm not going to beat you up because it says this. These are just kind of ideas for how your character behaves. Some of your backgrounds are going to have skill proficiencies that you can select. In this case, being a folk hero, I don't have a list to select from. It just tells me animal handling and survival are my 2 skill proficiencies that I gain from this. You can fill out character details, physical characteristics, everything like that if you want. Again, I don't get too hung up on these things. And then finally, we have equipment. For this, we're going to start with equipment. So when you start a new character in some campaigns, you can choose to just take the gold and then basically go shopping, so you're not confined to whatever's on the equipment list. To keep it simple this time around, I would select equipment. And then it's going to go through and tell you, okay, you select from these things. So this little block here, I can either take a light crossbow and 20 bolts. Don't worry about the 20 bolts, I don't count them. Or any simple weapon. And again, you click the box, it's going to tell you these are the simple weapons. You have access to the player's handbook through D&D Beyond. If you have questions about what weapon does what damage, you can go research that. For our warlock, we're going to go ahead and pick quarterstaff. And then we can either use a component pouch or an arcane focus. This is going to be specific to casters. Basically, this is going to tell us, do we have basically a pouch we keep on our side, so when we cast our spells that require components, we have them readily available, or are we using an arcane focus, so basically when we cast spells, we have a magical object that we focus through. So like in this case, my warlock walks around with a giant orb that they carry around, and then they do all of their cool stuff out of that. A Scholar's Pack or Dungeoneer's Pack, if you want to go research them, you can. Ultimately, are they going to make a huge difference here? Probably not. I'm going to take a Dungeoneer's Pack. It's going to tell you what's in here. Includes a backpack, crowbar, hammer, pythons, torches, tinderbox, blah, 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 blah. The stuff you need for being on the road. You guys aren't going to be on the road much in this. Okay, so then you can choose leather armor, any simple weapon, and 2 daggers. So automatically off the bat, we get the leather armor here. The any simple weapon is what we're selecting off the list. Let's say we've got a dagger, just in case we need to sacrifice something to Cthulhu. Okay, for being a folk hero, we also get a set of artisan's tools. Well, since we're proficient in brewer's supplies or brewer's tools, it's probably important that we have some brewer's supplies. And then we also get a shovel, an iron pot, some common clothes, and we get 10 gold right off the bat. And then make sure you click Add Starting Equipment. Now, this is where most people forget to do this next step. So you have selected all of the things that your character has on their person. Next, you need to go in to their inventory, things like daggers. Okay, wield your daggers. You only need to wield one. If you have multiple ones, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Daggers can be thrown, so it's important to track how many you have on you and how many you recover, things like that, but we'll worry about that later. Your armor, if you don't click wear on your armor, you won't have any armor on, and you're going to be really easy for me to take out. As much as I love that, you guys probably want to put your armor on. Quarterstaff, again, wield the quarterstaff. You're generally only going to be using one or two of these things at a time, but I always tell you to wield them so that you know, okay, these are the available options I have when we're looking at it. Once you've gone through and have wielded at least one of everything, as well as put your armors on, that is our equipment. Attuned magic items, don't worry about that for now. You guys don't have any magic items to attune to. This is a skill or property that your character, once we start to gain powerful magic things later on, your character can only have 3 things attuned. Basically, 3 things you understand the intrinsic magical properties of. And that's almost it. We're very close. So if you click View Character Sheet, ooh, I moved and now my lighting caused my camera to go all fun on me. Okay. So, this is what your character sheet's going to look like. Notice my initiative is -1 because my dexterity modifier is -1. That affects that. My armor class is 10. Even though I have my leather armor on, I'm still super squishy. Proficiency bonus. This helps to tell you, okay, the things that you are proficient in, they have the little black dot here. You add this to whatever your score is. So I'm proficient in animal handling. Normally I would just have a +1. However, I have a +3 because I'm proficient. +1, it's a wisdom. +2 because I'm proficient equals 3. These are all of the different skills that you have. Okay, so when we start playing, I'm going to ask for things like make a perception check. You'll do that check. It's going to add a +1 to whatever you roll. As rogues, I might ask you to make a sleight of hand check. Okay, for my warlock, I'd have a -1. You're probably going to have like +infinity or something because you're a rogue. Other things on your character sheet. These are your saving throws. When things like traps or spells go off, you might have to make a saving throw. It's going to reference this here. Your actions. These are things that you can do when it comes to your turn. So you can make a dagger attack. You'll have +3. This is the damage. You might be able to make a quarterstaff attack. This is the damage for one hand. Quarterstaffs can be wielded two-handed as well, at which point you'll use this damage instead. So, the actions in combat are listed here. So once we get to combat, this is an idea of things you can do. I know one of you was asking about throwing somebody over your head when you are a druid that casts lightning. That's going to be a grapple check. And then we'll probably have to make an athletics check, things like that. You can punch somebody barehanded, it's called an unarmed strike, or you can kick somebody or headbutt them or do whatever. Bonus actions, some of you will have things that you can do with your bonus actions. Like for our warlock right now, the only thing they can do as a bonus action is 2-weapon fighting, meaning if they have 2 daggers, they can stabby stab once, they can stabby stab again. Okay, so the next section, for those of you that are casters, you will need to add spells. You might already have some here based on your races that you selected. Those are going to be intrinsic things that just come from being an elf, or being an Aarakocra, or being a Kenku, or whatever. But you'll notice I don't have any spells selected. I need to go to this little section here called Manage Spells. So notice right now, we don't know any spells. We need to add spells. So cantrips, we need to add, and then known spells. Cantrips are going to be separate from our spells. Cantrips are things that your character is going to know how to do without thinking about, so they don't cost any of your spell slots. Okay? They're basically things that you can do without even having to think about it. So that's going to be our 0 level spells. You can click on each spell, figure out what it does. As a warlock, I always take Eldritch Blast. And then another good one for warlocks, let's go with Frostbite, because I like ice spells and things like that. Okay, so our cantrips are full now. Notice we can't click learn on any of the rest of them. It's telling us, okay, that's the maximum amount you know. Generally speaking, cantrips, once you learn them on here, they don't change. Generally speaking, they are something that your character just knows. If you selected something and we try and use it and you're like, oh, that doesn't work at all how I thought, we can look at, a one-time change of, okay, go pick a different one because it doesn't work like you thought it did. Things like that. Don't ever be afraid to ask, hey, can we change this, or hey, can we do this? Generally speaking, I want you guys to have fun, so I'm not going to do anything too crazy. But we do also, once you pick a cantrip, we're going to try and stick to that's what you get. Things like that. Same kind of goes for first level spells and things that go into your spell slots. So in this case, we get to know 2 spells. So Armor of Agathis is typically a good one for a warlock to take right away, and then Hex is very, very common for warlocks to have. So these are the 2 spells that my warlock knows. Okay, that's all I need to do there. That's all it was. So make sure you go learn your spells. Otherwise you get into combat and you'll go, oh, I don't know any spells. And then we'll have to sort it out. Okay? So then, up here, notice this little box here. This is your spell slots. This is how many times you can cast a combination of spells before you have to take a rest later on. So in this case, my warlock has 1 spell slot. So it doesn't matter if it's Armor of Agathis or it's Hex, but I can cast 1 spell, and then I'll have to take a rest at some point to replenish this. Wizards, sorcerers, things like that, you're going to have more spell slots. You can cast any of the spells that are on your knowledge list up to this limit, whatever that limit is. Cantrips, you can cast these any number of times, doesn't matter. Still operating within the action economy, but any number of times. There's no spell slots for cantrips. It's just, I'm going to Eldritch Blast that, I'm going to Eldritch Blast that, and I'm going to Eldritch Blast you, and you, and you. You're cool. Fuck you. I'm out. Okay. That is pretty much setting up your character. Spells are, generally speaking, the only additional thing that you need to worry about once you get your character sheet up. Features and traits should be everything. This gives you, again, kind of a brief rundown of things that your character can do based on their class or their race. Okay, so what you need to do from there is you need to take and you need to get the shareable link for your character. Okay, once you get that shareable link, you're going to come in here and you're going to type beyond okay, and it's going to give you a brief summary. This is kind of your character sheet, and it's going to go, okay, here's all the things about your character. Now once we start playing, you'll be able to use your features relatively seamlessly. We have a bot in the channel that's going to do a lot of the stuff for us based on our character sheet. That should be pretty much everything. If you have any additional questions, feel free to hit me up. We can do a Discord call, we can type it all out, but that should be pretty much everything you need in order to get started. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys in the channel.